Hey, what's going on? Mr. Dave here, talking about rebar, talking about making fake rocks. A lot of guys have asked me about how I do that, and particularly when they're just trying to make a single stone. We're here on the Alpine job, monster job. You got to check out the videos on my YouTube channel. It's pretty crazy. But in this case, this is a good place and a good time to start talking about how we do it with a single piece of rebar, and then add to that to make these small little rocks, or even the bigger ones. They all start with the same process. You create the footprint, that is the amount of space that the rock would sit on the ground, what it would look like, and then you bend up rebar and begin to figure out the shape. So I got 2 sticks of rebar, and I'd like to show you how I do that. So I use 3/8 inch rebar, and this is what it is. I have trouble focusing on that. So the beginning stages, and I like to do as many bends as I can before I tie it off, because it's easier to do, from my experience anyway. So when I do it with my knees, some people think that's a little crazy, but for some reason it doesn't bother me at all. You start off with a bend, right? So we've got a little bit of a bend. It's not exactly 90 degrees, so I'm going to come in a little closer, and then I like it coming out. Since I got 2 sticks, I got enough room to come over here. So I'm kind of remembering where that is. This is going to be the part that's laying on the ground flat. Understand? That makes sense? So you can still keep shaping it and playing with it. Again, this is the part that's laying on the ground. The trick is to watch out for symmetry. You'll tend to want to make it like into a square or a circle. It's just sort of human nature that we end up wanting to do that. It's a strange phenomenon. So I'm pulling this in thinking, what will that do? If I bend it here, what kind of a shape will that bring? It's sort of visualizing from this point, or this point, or this point, what kind of a flat base for the rock am I going to end up with? So I'm going to pull this in tighter. You could even go to here and tie it off. But I'm going to just have a little bit of a bend in the last part of it here. So that's the part of the rock that'll be flat on the ground, or the hillside, depends on what you're doing. If I'm doing one on a hillside, then I keep that in mind and I make the rocks come over and account for that pitch. If you do it on the hillside, if you do it and like you're doing the flats and you make your rock, then it looks like it's sort of sticking straight out of the hill, which may be fine. There's no problem. It does create a situation where it'll be weighted down, and then maybe this side of the rock will be upside down, a little bit more of a challenge to get mud to stick on it. So, let's see what I think about it. I'm going to pull it in a little bit. So we got it just about where we want it for that base. You see, I'm getting it to where it's pretty darn close, so I'm not having to wrestle with it. So there we have it. Okay, so that's the part that's going to be flat on the ground. Oh. Use the spinner, I do anyway, because it allows me to tie off wires with one hand. If you're trying to do it with a spool, a little tough to do. Always grab a little handful. Keep them loose in your hands and you'll get the tie wires out. If you hold them tight together, they do not want to come out. And you end up fighting with them, like, get me, come out of there. So you got to kind of keep it simple, keep it chill. So now we've got the base. Again, that's the flat part that goes on the ground, right? So here we have our starting point. So now this just needs to go up. So I'm going to flip this around and then give it a bend. Sometimes when you're bending it, things want to spin and twist. So you have to figure out a way to do it in a way that keeps it stable. So now you can put it flat on the ground, stand on it, and you can mess around with it a little bit. Okay, so I can see where it's going that way. So now I'm going to bend this over, put another bend in it. You can see how that's starting to shape up. So this is not exactly in the center. It's not flat, so you have a pitch going this way, which is good. When I'm making my rocks, I like to attach them with the flat part, you can see that flat part, so that makes it really lock in good. So now what I got to do is I got to attach all these parts together with my tie wires. And when you're doing the rock in the beginning, you want to do 2 ties, because otherwise they just flop around. You can see they're a little awkward and unstable. Wanted to get that over there, remember? Use your feet, your arms, your hips, whatever's going on. Loosen your hand to get them out. Otherwise, they'll grab. It's kind of like a little monkey game when you were a kid. Barrel of monkeys. They all hook. They all little arm hooks. These things are kind of like that. If you, by the way, spin to where it breaks, don't feel bad. I'm still spinning until they break. Even after almost 28 years doing this. Then you put 2 in, because you're going to be putting force on this in different directions as this part continues to need to be bent. Alright, so this is the second 10-foot piece of rebar. So we have to go somewhere with that. Well, it seems like given where it's on this side of this one, we can bend it that way. We can make it higher if we want to. So we'll make it a little bit higher in this corner. See how it's starting to... Now we're starting to get the different sides and planes of our rock. And use your feet. Use whatever you need to hold this sucker in place. Get in the middle of the bend somewhere. I also like to crisscross them. That gives it a little bit more of a stable tie off. So we've got that there. So where am I going to go next? Well, let's keep carrying this process up. I'll just spin it all the way around. See, it's stressed out that tie, so having 2 on there is a definite must, definite plus and must. All these guys, you want to push them down sort of out of your way, because they may end up being in the concrete being a problem. You just kind of wrestle with it a little bit. So I'm going to come, I think, about to that same position. Well, maybe go a little lower. All right, so see, this is it, man. It's as simple as that. In terms of the technique, again, the tendency is to make things symmetrical, and you find yourself making rocks that look like squares or too roundy. Again, I'm doing all this without the hickey bar. The bender bars, affectionately called hickey bars, can assist you in changing how things are handled as well. This piece already had a bend in it, but that's okay. We can use that to our advantage or not. Sometimes I put the rebar on the inside, and I like that because that gives additional strength. They're a little squirrely, they kind of run around on you a little bit. You want to overlap your rebars, good half to a quarter inch. That's this area right here. You want it to stick out because otherwise
pop free. These ones sometimes I'll do even more than 2 because, especially if it's a project where you're using hickey bars a lot and putting a lot of force on the rebar, that can cause these ones that are finishing out to pop free. So now we have a good amount of stuff to continue making our rocks. Put over here, maybe they can see it. And so it's got some asymmetry to it. Got some nice angles. It goes flat to a bend. Our bottom footprint is kind of interesting. So I'd add another piece of rebar right here, maybe to here, and then loop it around and just shrink the gap. So, I mean, that is it. Remember to double tie when you're starting it off so stuff stays pretty stable. And if it was a 10-foot rock, it's all the same thing, just bigger lengths and bigger scale. Anytime along the way you can play with it and bend it. We'll talk about how to use the bender bars and stuff and what they allow you to do too. And notice on this one, this portion they're pretty parallel, but that's okay because it's just one spot. And that's something that's okay. It's okay to have areas of symmetry and stuff in rock. It's just overall you want to keep making sure it has some kind of a irregular but natural shape. So that's how you make a rock, man, out of 3/8" rebar. In terms of this shaping approach, of course you can make fake rocks out of a number of different things and different strategies and ways. You can use a pile of dirt and that can turn into a nice little dome, low-level stone. Foam, people use foam. If I use foam, I reinforce it with rebar everywhere. But rebar is the most common one. So here you go. That's how to make a rock with rebar and these little tie wires and the little spinny. All right, so there you go.